I want to thank all of you for being on today's call. I appreciate you joining us. We're here today to talk about using AI in your assignments. This is, of course, a very hot topic since we have so many more opportunities with it's like the 1-year anniversary already of ChatGPT. There's lots of other AI platforms that we have access to now at no cost. And so it's great that we have these options when we think about our different teaching tools, our teaching toolbox. I want to make a quick pitch for what we've got coming up this spring. This spring, we have a whole series of sessions focused on AI, and you're probably familiar with most of those already because you've signed up for this session. You've probably seen the other ones. We did add more details to a couple of guest speaker sessions, the one on February 29th with Brevard College's Jim Brooks, and then we have one coming up on April 17th with North Carolina Community College's Darren Evans, and he's going to be actually focused on accessibility in AI, which is a really important topic. So wanted to make sure I drew your attention to those two in particular because the full descriptions weren't there when we sent out the sign up. Other than those, you know that there's a whole host of other sessions that go all the way through the month of April. Our very own Daniel Rickert, who's on the call with us today, he's going to be hosting a session at the end of April on using AI as a career coach, and I know some folks are also attending that session. So got lots of good stuff coming up this spring. Today, we're here to talk about using AI in assignments, and I've got some things to share with you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to launch into this. And I'll let you know that my goal today is to really give you a bit of a smorgasbord, I guess is a good way to put it. I want to give you a little bit of a tour on what you could be trying out in your classes. And through that tour, I'm hoping that you're able to pick something. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get us started. Here we go. Okay, feel free at any time, by the way, to throw something in the chat. Let me know if you've got questions or just take yourself off mute. We've got a nice small group, so you're welcome to throw something in the chat at any time or take yourself off mute if you want to stop me, ask a question, or share something. We've got some key objectives today and also some outcomes for you all. So I'm hoping to review several pedagogical approaches that are going to invite you to think about how you can be using AI in your assignments. And I'm going to do my very best to provide you with ample examples and resources. So again, you may feel like you're on a bit of a shopping spree today. My hope for you is that you're going to reflect on these suggestions throughout the session. And again, that's a great reason to use the chat, maybe throw something in there or take notes for yourself. And then at the end, I'd like to have some time for a discussion where you could say, here's a couple things that I think I might want to try. So that's where we're headed. If you would do me a favor and using your reaction button under more, I think you got a reaction button in your little menu there, right? Go ahead and show me your reaction to that. Does that sound good? Can I get a thumbs up? Or you could just do it on the screen. I love a screen show. Okay, I see applause. I see a thumbs up. Great. Okay, well then let's get started.
Button. Where am I supposed to be looking here? I'm sorry.
Oh, in your little reaction menu, you've got like emoji options and different things. I don't know if you ever used that in Zoom, Dan. There's a reaction under more. You've got all sorts of choices there. They're kind of fun. You could be partying. You could do all sorts of things with reaction.
I guess I'm looking for more, and I don't see that.
Do you see a reactions or a smiley?
No.
Interesting. Well, for now, I'm assuming that we're good to go forward.
Go ahead.
Does that sound okay? Okay, great.
Sure.
So first thing that I want to put out there is that we really are already in the future, right? Like I think some of us were thinking this was going to happen in a little bit, but it's already happening. We know that because our students are already using lots and lots of AI. Nationally, the statistics show that about 50% of students in higher ed are already using AI to do their work. And so we really need to kind of catch up to what students are doing. And I think there's a fear around the way that they're using it. So I want to try to debunk that a little bit. And this chart will hopefully help us. But AI is already ubiquitous. It's already helping us do so many things in our everyday life. And we're not necessarily thinking about it. We think it's very helpful, right? But then when we turn and look at our students, we may not necessarily see it in through that same lens. So I think it's really important that we just acknowledge that that we have the opportunity here to do something a little bit different with our classes based on our own preferences and our own use. For example, I'm using AI in a couple different ways. And if I trust myself to use AI in that way, I would like to trust my students to use AI too. And I might be able to like coach them into doing that, right? So I think we've got a real opportunity to be coaches instead of police officers. And so I would like for faculty to be moving into that space of coaching around AI and promoting the use of AI and developing AI literacy as opposed to policing the use of AI. This graph, if you take a quick look at it, and this was developed by Matt Miller from, he has a book and a website called Ditch That Textbook. If you look at these 5 different or 6 different rows, right, there's only one row where there's no use of AI. Okay. We are already at a place where the only way that we can ensure that a student is using no AI whatsoever in any part of their learning is that they're not using any devices. Because AI is already part of so many things. Even, I mean, if you really think about it, right? Even that autocomplete that you're getting in your emails all the time, that's a language model, right? So that's a lower form of AI than ChatGPT, but we're already using suggestions provided to us when we're writing in some of these platforms, and that's just the written stuff. So there's already a lot of AI happening, and we need to acknowledge that it's already there. And so how do we build better assignments around it? So again, we promote responsible use of it. I want to share from the front end that I've consulted a lot of different resources over the last year and a half or so. Prior to ChatGPT, I started looking into stuff, and then certainly in January of last year, I was learning as much as I could to try to, honestly, to try to do my job, but to try to learn for myself too, right? These are 3 different spaces that I'm going to reference today: Facebook groups, the DPI document that just came out a couple weeks ago, and then just various articles and blogs. So starting with Facebook groups, I've been a member of several different groups on Facebook, and this is the list. If you're interested in joining any of these, I highly recommend the very first one. I kind of put them in order for my preference. I think that first one has been really helpful for me because it's just idea, right? Like thousands of people are putting their ideas out there all the time. We have some really prolific scholars already in this area, and so those folks are publishing materials and they're sharing their stuff. It's very open source. That's a great one. And then the second bullet point, higher ed discussions of AI writing, that was kind of more because I used to teach English. I was certainly interested in that one, but they're talking about more than just composition. And then the other 4 are also good. The ChatGPT for experts is really supposed to be for people who are using it a lot more than me. I was just kind of in there lurking, looking around. And for the most part, I'm just on there learning. I'm not posting. But all 6 of these, I'm not good at counting, all 6 of these have been very helpful for me. The second resource is that North Carolina Generative AI Implementation Recommendations document. It's about 35 pages long. I'll just tell you now, you're getting this as a PDF as we wrap up today, and all of these are linked so you can get right to it. But this document, to me, is an incredible resource, but also is a really good impetus for the work that we can be doing at the community college level. Have any of you already looked at this? Are any of you familiar with this? Again, feel free to use a reaction. You can use your reactions in the chat as well. Like if you go to your little chat feature in Zoom, that might be the quickest way to do a reaction, is to use the little emojis there. But they're also, again, in the Zoom menu that kind of shows up on your screen when you scroll over the, I don't know, there's like usually a menu in the bottom that kind of appears and disappears. Any of you familiar with this document already? Elijah, I see you're not. Aaron, I wasn't sure. I know April had shared it with me, so I wasn't sure if you'd seen it or not. Here's what happened in my brain when I started reading through this. I went, wow, if public school units and instructors do this, we have got to be ready because juniors and seniors are going to be here before we know it. And they're going to have already been doing assignments with their teachers' instruction and support. And then they're going to get here and we're going to go, what? You can't do that. That's cheating. Like, right? Like that would be a move backwards. So they're really pushing for us to be jumping into this with both feet because their students theoretically are going to be doing it right now, next year. I anticipate there's going to be a lot of conversation around this. Now, that's not the only reason to do it, but I think it's one we need to be realistic about. And what they really promote a lot is AI literacy, which I, of course, think is incredibly important in our personal lives, right? But also when we think about our graduates, either they're moving on to transfer, or they're going to the workplace, that next step is going to anticipate them having awareness. And if they're going into the workplace, they're going to expect them to have some proficiencies to be effective and efficient employees. So this document, again, I really recommend that you take a look at it. This quotation is a great quick summary. The North Carolina Department of Public Instruction advocates for the responsible integration of AI technologies in education, aiming to cultivate an educational environment that empowers each individual to reach their full potential and cultivates a lasting passion for continuous learning. That's a pretty strong support for the use of AI. I've got a few different links here that, again, you'll have access to after the presentation. These are all pieces that I've been looking at or looked at in particular in preparation for this presentation. You'll see the same name a couple times, Malik. Ethan Malik teaches at the Wharton School of Business, and he's been, again, one of our more prolific scholars in this area already. His courses are AI mandatory, so he requires his students to be using generative AI in their assignments. And so that's something to really be curious around. And when I hear that, I go, oh, what's that about? I want to know more. So I tried to learn a lot from Dr. Malik. We also have a piece in here from OpenAI making some recommendation. Leon Furs is also he's a very prolific writer, and he's got a book that just came out. I haven't looked at the book yet, but he's got a couple of these pieces, scale 1 or level 1 and level 2, which I looked at both of those. And then Laura Duman, she's a writing instructor, but I really have appreciated some of the things that she shared on that AI writing. So just some articles for your reference. So I'm going to get started with the shopping spree now, and I'm just going to walk through. I think I've got 9 ideas in here, maybe 10, and each of them is set up kind of the same way. So you're going to see a title. So this is the way. This is the pedagogical approach, and then I'm going to talk through some methods, and then you're going to see at the bottom every single time the same thing: require chat record. So I'll just start with that. If we're going to be requiring students to use AI in classes, what we need to be doing is talking to them about how it's a tool, a learning tool, right? And just like we would ask them if they went to the Student Success Center, maybe get a report from their tutor, we need to be learning how they're using the AI tools so that we can coach them on that. That's part of the move that we're making pedagogically is, again, we come into this role as a coach, not a police officer. So we're coaching and saying, hey, I see what you did here with your prompt. Have you tried asking ChatGPT this? I see what you did here. What about asking Bard that? So that's a role that we get to play as we get more proficient. And I know there's a learning curve for us too, which is why I wrote the editorial I did. If you haven't seen it yet, take a look at the newsletter. But the more comfortable we become with AI, the more likely we are to encourage our students to use it. So every time we have our students using a generative AI tool, I really encourage you to ask them to share the prompts that they use, ask them to share the whole record. You can copy and paste right from that source, and they can turn that in as an appendix to the assignment. That's just good for them. And again, that just creates that transparency about their learning and their process. So that's going to be at the bottom of everyone. I'm not going to probably talk about that again. Let's go up here to the top. AI's Brainstormer. This is probably the most common way that people are using it right now if they're just trying to get ideas, right? And so there's different ways that we can interact with the generative AI. We could start by just saying, hey, I need ideas for a party. Can you give me 5 ideas for party themes, right? And I'm not giving it anything other than the prompt. We could, on the other hand, say like, hey, I'm thinking about throwing a party. I was thinking about maybe a pirate theme. Can you give me some other themes that are kind of similar to pirate, but maybe not pirate, right? So give them one or 2 ideas and then see what chat offers. Or you could go with that third bullet, which is to say, I want to throw a pirate themed party. I don't know if there's anything like un-PC about it, or if that could be like problematic for anybody. Can you give me any pros and cons for why that might not be a good idea in January, right? And then chat would probably come back with some things about freezing in the water or whatever, So you can do this in lots of different ways, but in each of these instances, you're interacting with chat as a brainstormer idea generator. It's helping you get ideas. So that's one method. Next, we're going to talk about using AI as a way to organize our notes. Okay. Some of the more paid for services are going to be better at this. I'll give that caveat. A lot of the things we can do with AI, we can do for free. But in this case, it may work better if a student is a subscriber to an AI service like ChatGPT 4. And the reason is it will take in different formats a little easier. Okay. The free version, for example, of Chat, it's really just copy paste with a text. You can't upload documents, but with 4, you can upload a PDF or a Word document and then ask it to compile. So you could take, in ChatGPT 4, you could take 3 or 4 Word docs and you could say, can you please review all these notes and provide an outline that goes over everything? Done, right? Now, that could be really helpful if the goal of the assignment is not necessarily to practice note-taking or organizing, right? If that's work that you know that your students need to get done, but they don't necessarily, they're not getting graded on it, it's just something that they need to do in the background, and they need to come in ready to do something with that outline, that may be okay for you because you may not be expecting them to practice that skill on that particular assignment. So it's up to you on the context of the assignment. You also may want to ask your students to take their notes and have the chat or the Google Bard, one of those services, do what's called an executive summary. So again, feed in those notes, either copy paste in or upload documents and say, could you please provide me with a 200-word summary on this? And then you could actually use that as a way of maybe countering the student summary, right? So you could use it in a lot of different ways. Maybe you have your students do it and then you have the AI do it and see if there's anything that's different. Right? And that's kind of a neat way to teach that literacy piece as well. And so in that last bullet point, that's kind of what I'm getting to. If you prompt the AI generator to do it, and then you use that as a starting point, you can then review it and say, oh, but it missed this, and this is actually really important. So depending on what you're wanting your students to be working on, you can ask AI to be an assistant in notes organization. Here's a third idea. This one, there's been a lot of talk around this with K-12, and I think we're getting further and further along with this in the post-secondary grades as well. In K-12, it's the Khan Academy has Conmigo. I was trying to think of the name. Conmigo is a K-12 AI assistant that some school districts are already contracting with, and it's a very interactive, personalized learning assistant. I've seen it in action a little bit in some demos, and it's pretty powerful for that individualized instruction. So I definitely think that's a great option for younger students. For older students, I think what we need to think about is how we're prompting the AI. And I'll reference Ethan Malik. He's got some really great prompts in his work, and you're welcome to dig into those and find those. They're really good. But he actually prompts the AI. He'll throw in a prompt and say, you are a helpful, optimistic individual who likes to help other people with their academic work. Like, so he'll prompt them to say, like, you're a tutor. You're going to ask a question, and then you're going to wait for the student to answer. And so the tutor is essentially, programmed into the chat service. And then the student interacts and says hello. Like once the student types in hello, then the tutoring begins. The AI can help students who maybe have some gaps, right? By prompting them with sample questions and problems. I mean, especially you think about like certain areas of study where there's like, you just need to give them problem after problem or scenario after scenario. This can be great because it can generate them very, very quickly, right? You can have AI help students review specific concepts that the student identifies. So a student can say, well, I'm in a course right now called this. We're using this textbook. It goes over these, like, again, it's about the prompting. It goes over these concepts. Can you quiz me on these topics? And so then the AI service could do that. And you could also ask your students to use the AI to provide just a basic overview of a concept to get them up to speed quickly. And this is that acceleration factor that people talk about, but I don't think that we've experienced enough. I'll give you a very quick example from my personal life. My daughter was working on an application for something, and I used a phrase. I said, well, you got to look at what's in the literary canon. And she said, what's the literary canon? And it's like an English teacher's term, right? And I said, let's ask ChatGPT. So I prompted ChatGPT. I said, Chat, could you please explain the term literary canon to a high school student? And there it went. And I said, and can you please give me 10 examples of works that might be included in an American literary canon? And there it went. And it saved me a lot of time telling her, right? But I also felt like that was kind of a nice conversation piece with her to then be able to, like, it wasn't just mom saying it, right? So sometimes it's nice to use AI as, again, a second voice or a tutor when an individual doesn't have the capacity or the ability to serve in that tutor role. Again, I think it's great to require a chat record. So if you assign to your students, I want you to pick it, like, you're picking a topic. I want you to go home and use AI to learn a little bit about the topic so that you can come in tomorrow and share what you learned. Bring your chat record with you, right? So again, requiring that chat record. This next one is kind of like that next step, and I use it a lot. I love asking chat to provide me with resources, with links, so that I can then go in and I can do my extra work, right? It's kind of like an amped up library database. It does pull from different resources, so I still go in and use the library databases as well, but it's able to get anything that's on the open web. So it does pull some stuff. So one idea here is, you could ask the AI service to provide you with an initial set of resources. And a lot of times, like I was using this the other night for something, it gave me a summary even though I didn't ask for it. It said, can you give me some resources that show that increasing student engagement in online courses helps students do better in classes? I mean, I know that's true, like it's definitely true. There's tons of research that says it, but I needed the name of a resource. And it did that for me very, very quickly. It also gave me like 3 resources and gave me 3 little summaries. That next one, you could say like, hey, I've been reading these books or I've been reading these articles and I'm trying to find common threads or common ideas between them. Can you help me out? And so can you please give me any overlapping ideas or threads that are running through these texts? If the AI service has the ability to get to that source, then it can do that work. You have to have awareness around what's available. So if it's something that's behind a firewall or isn't available on the open web, then it's not going to be able to do it. And it may hallucinate. We know that that's one of the cons of using AI is it's going to try to help you. So it may give you information that's not accurate. So it's important for you to always go back and check. And like with your students, you would want them to have their own ideas and then maybe use this as a counterpoint. This next one is to use AI in kind of a unique way, and I think it gets at the point I was just making, right? So we know that one of the downfalls right now around generative AI is that it thinks it knows things, right? It's going to provide us with information, but that information is not always accurate. And so we can take advantage of that by helping our students see that, by bringing that out into the sun. There's this really, really smart teacher who posted her assignment, again, in one of those Facebook groups, and I just thought this was brilliant. She had her students ask AI to explain a concept, and it needed to be a concept the students were incredibly familiar with and felt like they were like the expert voice on, right? So it could be any concept. I can't remember even what class it was that they were in. It may have even been just a personal topic of choice, right? Whatever the AI respondent provided, the student's assignment was to then go through and using a color code highlight tool, highlight the information that was red, inaccurate, yellow, not relevant, or green, accurate and relevant. Now this is a screenshot, and you can see here there's 20 papers here. Look at all the red. That's a lot of red, right? So what we're seeing here is that AI provides information. It's not always clear that the information is accurate. Students sometimes don't even know because there's a lot of content here that's not highlighted at all. So the student may not even be sure if it's accurate, right? But this is a really important lesson for the students. First of all, it gives them a chance to check in on what they know, right? So depending on the topic you have them interact with, it may or may not provide them with an experience that's related to the content of your course. But it will certainly, if they put in a topic that they know very well and they see that they're getting information that's not accurate, it's going to make them think twice about using it in ways that we are concerned about, right? Reminding students that they're ultimately responsible for whatever they submit in their coursework, that they have to bear the responsibility of vetting the information. This is a great assignment to get them to have that moment of realization like, oh, I cannot depend on AI, right? Because AI is going to include some information that's not accurate. I want to take a breath for just a second and ask you all to weigh in so far. Are you seeing anything that sounds interesting? Are you thinking about any of these tools as potential options for you? And again, feel free to take yourself off the mute or throw it in the chat.
I I didn't realize that this was like on the educational side. I thought it was like a more broader overview, but it is actually interesting nonetheless, to hear a lot of, and the references and stuff that you're providing. I'm looking forward to those, but from an educator standpoint, I kind of don't fall into that one.
Yeah, I got you, Dick. So glad you're on the call. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say I have been using it a little bit just for myself personally. I'm working with some high school students and helping them to summarize some concepts that might be a little bit more complicated. So just asking, like, I'll even put in like my summary of a concept and then ask like GPT, like, further summarize this or summarize this in like simple terms or something like that.
Yeah.
But it is tricky to figure out how I can get my students to, I know some of the students are using it for sure
Yeah.
to do work.
Yeah, they are. And again, the more we talk about it with them and learn how they're using it, the more we can coach them into using it in ways that still helps them learn, right? We don't want them to use this as a bypass. We want them to use this as an assistant. And that's ultimately how all of us are going to be using AI. It's already assisting us again in lots of other aspects of our lives, and employees are being encouraged to use it to assist them in their work. So that's really the goal. I love what you're talking about when you think of like having it explain it a different way, because I think we've all been in that situation where we try to explain something and it's just not clicking for the student. So if we could have it in like 2 or 3 different ways, and sometimes we could say like, could you take this down to like, and I'm saying this with full recognition that this is the reality of working at a college with various levels of ability. We have students that really conceptualize more in that late middle school, early high school range of cognition. And then we have students who are very, very advanced and maybe they've already taken the course and they need some enrichment, right? Like in their head, they've taken the course, right? So like, can you provide some enrichment ideas or some enrichment examples? So you can use AI from the teacher side as a support structure with, like you said, with helping provide examples. That's great, Aaron. Thank you. Elijah, are you thinking of any of these as being possible helps?
I'm thinking about this last one. I think that would be helpful for the students to see that AI is not always accurate and to give them an assignment that says, hey, plug this into AI and see what it spits out.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, we're going to keep moving. This next one I love for a couple different reasons. We know that our students are incredibly visual. And even if we're not teaching a class that requires the use of visuals, most of us are trying to provide visuals all the time. And the reason we're doing that is we know that if we can capture a student's interest with an image, then we may keep them engaged a little longer. Well, the same is true when the students are creating work for themselves. If they can add an illustration or an image to something that they're working on that captures the idea that they're trying to get at, that's a really powerful way for them to make connections in their brain, because many of our students think first in images and second in words. In fact, more students think in images and sounds than they do in words, right? So if we know that linguistic intelligence is lower for a lot of our students, let's capture that, let's pull in that additional intelligence and let it help support the linguistic or the numerical intelligence. We can ask AI to create an image that's going to accompany a text or an idea, right? So if a student is assigned to come up with a project, have them have a cover image that does something to capture the whole feel of the project. My daughter, I talk about my kids a lot. My daughter turns in projects sometimes where they have to have like a cover sheet, like a portfolio, and she always finds a photograph or takes a photograph because she likes to have that feel, right? Using AI is another option. Okay. You could also ask AI to generate an image that then is going to start something, right? So maybe you have your students use generative AI to then start a conversation, or use generative AI to then start a scenario or a piece of writing, right? If you prompt generative AI to create a scenario, an image, a photograph, you can use lots of great descriptive words. By the way, I think prompt generation is really the next writing instruction, because people need to get better at writing prompts to get what they want, right? I have no idea. These are all generated by AI. Most of my images in this presentation were, and I'm just trying to figure out what the prompt must have been for some of these, because certainly for this first image on the left, I have no idea what this artist said in the prompt to get this particular image. I think it's breathtaking. But these are really smart ways of using the tools to continue getting students to be creative, right? And we actually have an instructor here on campus who's already using generative AI to do image work. Aaron Bernard, who teaches art, who couldn't be on the call because he's teaching, he is using generative AI in most of his assignments. And this is an assignment from his class this semester. I'm not going to read through everything, but I'll tell you, he's prompting the students to actually talk first about their favorite art. That's the first question on the right side here. Answer in 10 or more sentences, what's your favorite art and why? Well, that's the kind of thing most people are not going to want to put in to have chat generate it because they want to actually talk about the art they like. So he's getting some authentic writing from them. And then he says, go use an AI image generator and put in a list of your favorite things and see what comes out. And he gives some instruction, right? He tells them how to post it. And he actually requires that they title their work. Okay, and he has a little bit of extra information in there about like the response requirements and stuff for other students. He also provided an example, which was his example that you see over on the left. And you know what's really great about this assignment is he's getting at some important questions we're all asking, right? Like, who owns this art? Who generated this art, right? So he's asking some important philosophical questions from his discipline, but he's also engaging his students in a way that gets them, this is the first week of class, get them to think about what do they like about art, what do they think about art, getting them to share a little bit about themselves. So just a really, really, really smart use of AI. And I wanted to share with you a couple responses just as examples. So this was a first example here, and you can see the writing on the left and the image on the right. And I won't ask you to read the whole thing, but you can just grab a couple sentences from the description. If I'm grading this, I know my student has written that work. And I also know that my student was engaging with a tool that they're probably going to be asked to engage with as a student, as an employee, potentially even as an artist, if this is a future art major, right? So this is a great example of the assignment. Here's another one, kind of fun. And again, this isn't a writing class. This isn't actually an art class. It's art appreciation, but it's not an art technique course, right? But he's asking his students to express themselves authentically and then use a tool to create a piece of art. And this student, I really appreciated this student put the words that they used at the bottom of their entry. So we can see when the student put in these words, this list, this is the art that came up. Pretty fun. Aaron told me I was allowed to name him directly and to show examples, and he saw the PowerPoint ahead of time. If you want to talk to him more about his use of AI, I know he'd be happy to have a conversation. So he's doing a lot of great things. He's actually been asked to speak at the state level around his use of generative AI in his courses. So really excited for Aaron and all that he's doing in his classes. Okay, next tool. This one's really exciting for me to think about as a writing instructor and the thinking about the paper load that some of us have when we're grading writing or responding to writing. So we have an opportunity to leverage AI to take some of the workload off of instructors. And again, if we bring this out in the open and we make it very clear to students that this is part of the assignment, then they're not cheating anymore, right? So what we do is we ask the AI to take a look at an assignment. And again, this could be done in the free version as a copy paste, okay? And then we ask AI to take on the role of a helpful reviewer who can provide feedback and suggestions for revision. The prompt would be that, right? Please provide suggestions for revision, not please revise. And then the student would submit the record of that exchange so that the instructor could see this is what the student asked AI to do, this is what the AI response included, and then you can have conversation with the student about their revision plan based on that. Now, when I was a full-time writing instructor, which I gladly did for 22-ish years, I did a lot of review like this, but there was no AI. So we're talking, 60 drafts a week, and quick turnaround. It was very time consuming. And, you know, I'd like to think I'm pretty good at it, but I'll tell you, after about 20 of those drafts, I really would have loved to have had an AI assistant. So if an instructor is no longer able to keep up with the paper load because we have increasing course numbers or, you know, just a big student load, then this would be a great way to still ensure that students are getting helpful feedback. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a good replacement for peer review. I think peer review still has a place. If we're talking about an actual writing classroom, I would always include that as well. But if you're not even in a writing course, right? Like if you're teaching a course outside of composition and you want your students to submit a draft and get feedback before they turn it in, this makes a lot of sense to me to have them get a little bit of revision help. In the past, for those of you that have had papers turned in, you were probably just getting a first draft, right? Because students aren't going to do a revision on their own. You can also take that feedback that it gives and ask AI, well, how would you suggest that I implement that feedback? So if a student is stuck on a piece of feedback, you could say, well, can you make some suggestions for how I could rearrange this paragraph? And then you would also get that record as well. So you could have it suggest revisions, and you could also have it give a sample revision of sections if you wanted to go a little bit deeper. Now, one thing I want to give a caveat in this one. I think a lot about privacy, and I have yet to submit any of my writing to an AI service. I'm very protective of my writing, right? So even though I write lots of stuff, I write it all and I revise it all myself. I'm not sure that it's fair for us to anticipate that every student is going to be okay copying and pasting their work into an AI text generator, because once that work is there, it then becomes part of the larger collection, right? So one suggestion, if you're going to use this tool, give an alternative. So students need to either use AI for feedback or sign up for Thinking Storm or go to the Student Success Center, right? Like they need to use one of those options. It could be an option in getting feedback, not the only option. This next one is, I think, a lot of fun for students. Especially if you've got a course where maybe there's lots of topics that can create some great discussion, you can encourage your students to put their position on a given topic into AI and ask it to provide a counter perspective to specific points. Now, this could be in preparation for a discussion you're going to have in class. This could be as a way of preparing to write a piece about that given topic, right? This could actually just be as a homework assignment following a conversation that's already taken place in class, right? Like, well, it sounds like we all agree X. Let's go home and find out what other perspectives are out there. I want you to all go home and put in a prompt asking for counterpoints to this particular position. So you can use it in lots of different ways. And you can also use it to, like, you could ask, say, ChatGPT, hey, Chat, I think I feel pretty strongly about this given topic. Can you ask me some questions to help me strengthen my position? Maybe play devil's advocate so I really feel confident about my position. And again, depending on the prompt, I'm kind of coming up with it on the fly. I'd have to refine it quite a bit probably before I really got into a conversation. But for those of us who have used it, you know, every time I'm using chat, I'm like, hi, chat. And it always says, thank you, and you're welcome. And it really does feel like you're having a conversation. I think a number of us are finding it so much more user-friendly than a Google search these days. And so that same kind of discussion can be happening in chat, but we're getting a little bit more information now, right? Like we're getting research along with it, or we're getting counterpoints along with it. This next one, I think, is probably a little controversial, and I'm excited to hear if any of you have differing views on it. Many of us do not teach writing, but we are often looking at writing, and sometimes we are frustrated because we are looking at writing that needed to go through a copy editor before it came to us, right? And we may even feel compelled to correct grammar errors. Personally, that was not something that I focused on because as a composition teacher, there's like 80 other things to look at before you look at grammar. But sometimes as non-writing teachers, you feel like you got to say something. Well, at this point, I think it's fair to say that most students are utilizing something like this already, right? They're utilizing Grammarly, they're getting suggestions even from Microsoft Word with spelling errors and stuff like that. Like these fixes have already been implied in lots of different platforms. If we directly tell students, I want you to go home, I want you to submit your revised draft to chat, ask it to clean up your grammar for you and do a copy edit, and then I want to see the record. Again, you're asking for it to give you the before and after you're vetting what it's done, what the student has done with that tool. And so you're putting it out there that this is a perfectly acceptable way to be using the service. Again, I think this is going to be just pro forma in the professions. I think that most professionals are already doing this because they know it's going to help clean up their work, and that's not their skill set. Like, there are so many people, talented people who maybe aren't taken as seriously because they struggle with spelling. Well, this is a great tool so that that becomes invisible. And I don't think that we need to be choosing our real estate agent based on how well they spell, right? Like, that's not the skill set we need to be evaluating them on. So if we've got those tools and those allowances in the professions, I think it's okay for us to allow students to utilize the tools as well. Now, is it important that people still learn to spell and punctuate? Yes, I'm a grammar teacher at heart, and I just don't think that being perfect with punctuation and knowing all the grammar rules is what should separate the A's from the B's in any given course, even a writing course. That's just my opinion. You can ask AI. I think the second bullet point is a really good one. If you know that students have repeated error patterns, ask AI to provide examples of specific grammatical issues that they're noticing. So you could say, like, hey, chat, I'm going to give you my essay. Could you identify what patterns of error you're noticing and help me fix those? And so then chat would respond and say, like, hey, I noticed you have a lot of comma splices. Here's what those look like, and here's how you can fix them. And we give them, the 2 or 3 options that students could use to fix a comma splice. That's a really great educational moment that you have now offloaded to AI because you don't need to be teaching grammar in your business course, right? So that's a great way to be using the AI. And then you can also ask AI to prompt revision based around a specific grammar error. So, and it may not even be a grammar error, but like, if you know that a specific student has a lot of run-on sentences or a lot of very short sentence structures, you could say, hey, I want you to use AI tonight to coach you on sentence combinations and maybe correcting run-on sentences. And you could even, again, depending on the library of prompts that you've developed, you may even say, I'd like you to use this prompt and send me the record. So again, you're coaching your students to use the AI tools, and they're delivering you a product that's more in line grammatically with what you'd expect. I'm going to ask for your opinions about this one, so hold on to them. Okay, this is our last option. This is AI as a role-playing participant, and this is another one that I'm really excited about. I think that we have a lot of opportunities in the profession preparation courses in CTE, but even in transfer courses where there's lots of different examples and scenarios that we could throw out to practice content knowledge. Ask AI to create scenarios related to specific course content so that students have to apply their knowledge to participate in the scenario, right? I was talking with one of our nursing instructors, Danielle Bruckner, and she's in the hospitals working with students, and she likes to do like little scenarios to prep them for their day. And I said, ask chat to give you a scenario related to the floor that you're on that day, right? Like, hey, chat, I need a scenario that deals specifically with burns, second-degree burns, on the skin of geriatric patients. Can you create for me a scenario that would involve, now I'm not going to say any more medical terms, but something like that. Chat can do that in 1 second. And now Danielle, who's the expert, can use that scenario to have discussion with her students on the floor, right? She doesn't have to be the one to write the scenario. She just has to be the one to determine whether it's appropriate, right? She's still going to vet the scenario and then also facilitate the conversation around the scenario. That's really great. So this could be something that you take from the chat and take it into the classroom. It could also be something that you ask your students to do, right? Go home, write up a scenario and have a role play with your chat service and practice the knowledge and then bring me your chat record. Right? So having the student practice, especially like certain communication skills, students struggle with certain communication exchanges. And quite frankly, they just need to practice and role play a lot with some of those. They can be very challenging for some of our students. So having us use AI as a potential role play is another option. So I promised you that I was going to give you a lot of different ideas. I want to take some time now. It's about 2:45-ish. I want to take some time now to open up for some discussion and find out which ones appeal to you or sound interesting to you that you might want to dig in and think about, because that's where teaching and learning can provide some support. I want to ask you how you might try this in your own courses, and also find out, your thoughts on this last question. Maybe we'll talk about that as well. If we're not doing these things, what happens, right? If we're not teaching our students how to use AI as a learning tool, what happens? So I'm going to just open up the floor, ask you to come off mute or open up your chat and let us know what you're thinking. And I saw that Dan, I think Dan, you corrected my spelling on something, which I'm really glad you did. I probably spelled ideogram wrong in one of my credits because I typed it in wrong once too, and I went to a site that wasn't that site. So thank you.
Well, I was interested. I wanted to run it and see what happened.
Yeah, ideogram is great. And yeah, this last one, it does, I did spell it wrong. I see it right there. What's even funnier, Dan, do you see the word bubble? I did this on purpose. The word bubble above his head.
Yeah,
Ideogram is like some of the other image generators. They're good with images. They're not good with typography. And so spelling has been a real issue for anything text based, right? And over the weekend, my husband and I were using Ideogram to try to get an image of a birthday cake for something he was doing for his business. And we put in the prompt several times, like, we need a birthday cake with 4 candles. We got 5 candles. We got 3 candles. We never got 4 candles. It could not count to 4. It was so bizarre. So yeah, again, it's not perfect. I'm gonna stop talking. What are your thoughts?
I had written in the chat that I thought it was kind of cool that it, and can't remember how I actually verbalized it, but the correct and incorrect information.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I just spent a lot of time grading a lot of written work with rubrics.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know whether I could actually put the criteria for a rubric in and then upload the paper and see whether or not it has the opportunity to make sure that all of the required elements are there. I wonder
Dan,
if it can actually do that.
yeah, you can absolutely do that. It depends on how you format your prompt when you put it in. You know, you may have varying levels of success on how well it understands what you're asking it to do. What I encourage us to think about is where our role starts and stops, right? When it comes to grading, I think that we still need to say that we are the one putting the grade on the work.
Sure.
And so asking a chat service or a AI service to provide rubric feedback and then us going back over and checking them, I think that's the professional integrity of each individual. I think it's great, and I've had conversations with Kathy about this already. Asking AI to give feedback during a process, like in the formative assessment process, makes a lot of sense. Ultimately, an instructor has to say that they put their eyes on and graded each thing that's a qualitative grade. You know, if it's something that can be auto graded, that's different. So I think we're still in this gray area of like, yes, you absolutely can do that. And I still think you're going to have some paper load, right?
Well, I think with the color coding, that could be helpful. There's a number of students, unfortunately, who didn't break. Let's say there were 12 elements that they had to write a paragraph about, and each paragraph had to have 3 or 4 mandatory points, just by way of example. It was similar to what I did. And if it could color code each of those, my eye could immediately go to the place to say, yes, 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 you hit these points. Because in many cases, by the time they got down about 8 or 9 paragraphs into it, they started to get really lax in actually making sure that they hit all of the points that were required. And I was getting kind of like, blurry eyed at that point because
For sure.
So
Yeah.
it
And
increased my accuracy at very least, but I hear what you're saying.
we're in a vetting process right now too, right? Like you could do that and that could be really helpful. And if you're checking behind the AI and making sure, like that's one thing I think I've heard the most is that AI is great for experts. It's okay for intermediates and it's not good for novices. So you as the expert, you looking back over that piece and making sure that it color coded correctly, you need to do that with some level of regularity just to make sure, right? And the other thing, again, I would encourage you to think about is how much permission do you need to get from your students to feed their work into AI? So maybe it's a signature at the beginning of the semester. I'm going to be using AI services to provide additional feedback to you throughout the semester. If you are not comfortable with me submitting your work anonymously, please let me know or something. And so then you've got yourself covered because you would submit it all anonymously.